There was a time when people repeated it like a mantra. The camera never lies.
Why I started with photography was precisely because of the documentary value of the image and how it would allow me to get close to the truth.
Of course, it was a myth. Just like the saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Photography can capture a version of reality. Reality for me is kind of a subjective space, and photography captures that subjectivity within that.
A photo always has a person behind it, and that person always has biases, and they bring those biases in their case.
The problem is when those biases are repeated over and over, when they grab attention, they become the story. They are not necessarily a false story, but when it's the only story, it becomes incomplete.
Repeated images can become the accepted truth. It's that simplification that is the biggest danger in our world today. And this, I think, very much applies for how women have been depicted throughout the years, at least when we look at it in our archive at World Press Photo.
Women's position in society is always mediated through patriarchy. So the way that women are governed through patriarchy in society, I think, is reflected within photography.
Women most of the time are represented weeping or in distress or as victims or resigned, in a very passive role.
Of course, women break out of those roles, and there are feminist impulses to break out of the roles that are given to women. But photography often shows the state of society at the time.
What is very striking about seeing, on the one hand, this humongous number of women crying images in the World Press Photo archive, you also see, on the other hand, a very big number of men rescuing, especially rescuing either women or rescuing children.
Most of our Western cultural representations, and not only Western, there's always a hero, and until not so long ago, most of the heroes have been men.
Photography often gets stuck in a kind of binary. There is either suffering or there is bravery. There is either courage or there is oppression.
And those are images that, of course, were chosen by a jury, an independent jury, as winners of World Press Photo. But those are images also that have been published in newspapers and big medias, and that have been seen by many, many people around the world. And in that sense, for me at least, it begs the question, how has the repetition of these images constructed our understanding and our assumption of what women are?
The problem is not so much the existence of documents of women crying and of documents of men saving. I think just being aware of that stereotype, of that trope, of that cliche is already a step forward.
I do feel that there is a shift that is happening in the photo documentary and photojournalistic field. And I think that shift is because photographers are really asking themselves the question of what kind of story are you telling?
The present contemporary moment is really shifting the contours of photography because image makers are perhaps thinking of the complexity of the human experience.
Society has changed and the needs of society have changed. So it's not that photography by itself woke up one day and said, let's change. I'm tired of being, having to carry the weight of truth. Photography, just like any other way of expression, like any other language, had to adapt to the needs of society.
So I think definitely what is one of the pathways to go through in order to be able to present different type of imagery around women or around men is to be aware that this exists. World Press Photo's role is not to give answers. World Press Photo's role is to ask questions and to create workshops and masterclasses whereby we bring photographers in conversation together. And on the other hand, we create tools for the general public to be able to understand the images by making sure that the images are not manipulated, by researching every single caption that we put out, by curating what kind of images we put out on our social media, for example.
Research and fact-checking lay the groundwork, but the possibilities extend far beyond that.
I think if we're looking at the next 70 years, I would be quite interested in looking at identity as something that is beyond a unidimensional concept. So for me to sort of move away from the binary of men and women, but also to move away from the fact that a unidimensional identity characteristic, for example, women, is something that needs to be championed.
What the industry can do, photographers, institutions, museums, audience, what everybody could do, not only the industry, it's just to document themselves, be aware, be curious.
For me to understand photography, I need to understand politics. I need to understand my position as a citizen in the world. I need to understand the history of imperialism. If we are to really understand all those other tenets of what comes into the making of an image, then I think we would be more informed viewers and industry individuals. So I always encourage image makers and others to read. And often it is not readings on photography, it's reading about everything else in the world.